We are like almost 30 episodes into this, and still
I know.
I have trouble recording. Making sure that it records.
Oh, okay. Recording,
Welcome to the True North. Are you recording?
Go ahead. Recording. I am. Yes. check. Figured if you're checking, I better check.
Welcome to the True North podcast, where Abby and Ryan still don't know what they're doing. Two practicing light workers get together for an hour every week to talk about all things wholeness and healing for body and mind, so that you can What? I'm so blinking on this. Live as your true self and follow your true north.
Uh-huh.
How many times have I said that?
How many times have you said it and I still don't have it memorized myself?
I just get to that one spot and I'm just like, I look like I have a horn this morning, or like this one little tuft of hair. Looks like I look like a rhino person. Our kid calls it so he likes dinosaurs, and he rhinos look like pachyderms, just look like dinosaurs when they're in little, injection molded plastic toy form.
Yes.
So he calls rhinos Rhinosaurus. And it's the cutest thing.
Rhinosaurus. Oh.
Right?
Love that kid. Mm-hmm.
I love how he does words.
I do too.
What are we going to talk about today?
Oh, goodness. Well, I want to continue that ongoing conversation about selfishness.
Yes.
Well,
it's going to be a little bit of a different flavor of conversation today.
It is?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. Why is it going to be different?
Well, because I'm coming into this under the understanding that we are going to be debriefing some previous episodes in which I didn't realize that maybe I might have been selfish.
Well,
let's do
it. Let's do it. Let's debrief. That is one reason I haven't picked the conversation back up with you, because I figured it might be better live.
To do it here. Yeah. We can do this. We can do this in public. Okay, so...
Well, this really shows that, we still are learning as well, which is, I think, like that's the thing. And I've told you this before. It's sort of like my pet peeve with, motivational speakers sometimes, or life coaches, where it's like you feel that they are unreachable. Like they've reached this place. They know how to coach themselves. They're always positive and always happy. And I'm like, no. Yes, I'm going to live it to give it, but that means I'm still living. Like I haven't lived it, and now I'm just continually giving. I'm still living.
Right.
So that's what this is. What we're about to talk about and debrief is us still
showing
practicing.
how much we are not untouchable or out of reach for the everyday people.
Yeah, and I'm going to get a little vulnerable because I'm exposing some weaknesses here. So
Well, I think we both are. So do you want to talk about your experience first, like the box that you left and how you reflected on?
Yes. Okay. So we have been talking about the last few episodes, kind of the subject of that it's okay to be selfish has sort of been the main vein of conversation, and what we mean by selfish, and so then the last few episodes, what was happening is I was standing in my kitchen doing dishes, and I was listening to last week's episode. And I found myself getting really frustrated. And at you, I'm like, why? So again, I'm like, why am I frustrated here, Ryan?
I do this a lot.
You frustrate me. You really don't. You really don't. It's just, it goes back to what we've said before. It's like you've obviously triggered something in me that has nothing to do with you. But then I thought, okay, if I can be the observer and separate the two out, what do I think's going on with Ryan? Which, yes, that means sitting in your business. But then also what's going on with me. So what I was noticing is that I felt that you kept circling back to kind of rehash what we had already established in a previous episode.
Yes.
And that you were coming back and like, well, I want to circle back to this, and I want to talk a little bit more about what we mean by selfish, because people are using it to, in the wrong way and manipulate it in the wrong way. And I keep thinking in my mind, I'm like, I'm pretty sure we made it very clear. And the people that are listening are our people. Like if the people that Like, why would you listen if you were going to just use this to manipulate somebody else? Then you're not really hearing what we're saying. So I was just like, why do we keep coming back to this? So I had a hunch, which is what I do with my coaching hat, is like, okay, there's something else going on with Ryan, and I'll let you share your side of that story. But I shared with you my hunch on what I thought it might be over a Vox. And of course said, tell me where I'm wrong, because again, it's your business. I don't really know. It's just what I was picking up. That there was a deeper reason for why you kept circling back. So do you want to talk about that first, or do you want to talk about why it triggered me, my business first?
No, we can talk about... So you told me what you thought it was, and essentially it was that there are some people who I know listen to this podcast, and your hunch was that it was coming back around to me that some people were taking our words and twisting them in ways that we don't mean for them to be used. And then I was coming to the podcast to publicly talk to specifically those people. And and there was some truth to that. It was just a little bit, I think you were a little bit more focused in on some individuals, and I was kind of like, you were naming a fear that I had though, which was what if people don't hear what we really mean, but they hear like a surface level version of the words that we're saying to mean it, and then interpret that into a way that could cause them to cause harm. And honestly, I think that's, like, I didn't even realize this until after we had that conversation, that when you say our people, I don't even really know what you mean by that. And like, to my mind, we're talking to the general audience, like anybody who would need to hear this. But if it's someone who needs to hear this, if it's someone who's already on the same plane as what we're talking about, they don't need to hear what we're saying. And so, at least that's an assumption I've been operating by. Like, that's somebody that we'd want to come in and interview and get them to say it too.
Sure.
Right? So I'm sitting here thinking, like, if there's somebody who actually needs to grow in the direction that we're pulling, then that I can infer that they either haven't done that growing yet or are at the very early stages of it. And if they're in that place, then they still might also be tugged in the direction of operating out of fear or self-serving or defensiveness or old habits or whatever.
And I define those people as our people.
Right. I get,
which it sounds like you don't, but that's how I see, like, our people are there.
This is me making an assumption about what you mean when you say our people.
Because that means those people are like open and willing. They don't know this stuff. They haven't done it, but they're willing to do the work. They want to do the work. And our method for healing and doing that work is pleasing to them. Like, that's something that feels knowing and comfortable. So that makes you my people. Not that you're already there, but that you sort of like joining me on my journey because it resonates with you. That makes you my people.
And the thing that I was afraid of was, I don't really care what people think about what we say, but I do care what they do with what we say. And
do you really?
I do
not care. No, I get that part. Go back to the first part
about what people think.
Yeah. Do you really not care what people think?
There are some people whose opinions matter a lot to me. Some very specific people whose business I am in all the time. And when I interface with those people, I find myself immediately on the defense, and I will not say something unless I know that I can back it up in a way that will make them not argue with me. A couple of very specific people.
Which is why you circle back sometimes, because you question what you say.
Well, I So the people I'm talking about have been a part of my life for so long that I have developed this habit as a result of me having relationships with them and that being where they are in life. Mm-hmm. So now I have a habit of, I say a thing and then I fixate on it after having said it, trying to find every single way that it could have been taken the wrong way. That I could have used the wrong words or the wrong language or the wrong vocabulary, or there's like a piece of the puzzle that I didn't think about that if you plug it in, it makes everything look different. And when I'm in the moment, I'm so in the moment, I'm not doing that. I'm just being present with the person I'm here with, and whatever thoughts come to the surface, that's what I latch onto, and then we're off to the races. And so then afterwards, I go into introspection, or I try to really pick it apart as though I'm someone who's predisposed to disagree with everything I said. Mm-hmm. And what would that person say? And so that's why I kept coming back, like, okay, well, we said this and we meant this, but this could be misinterpreted. This could be the wrong way. Or sometimes I just keep thinking about it, and then I stumble upon a new epiphany that I wish I had had while we were recording.
I do that too.
You know, so then I'll come back and be like, okay, well, now I have better words for what we were trying to say. I think I even said that phrase. You know, here's what we were trying to say 3 episodes ago. And so there's some of that, but there is definitely a defensive posture of like, oh, this could be used. This could be used. Not. I mean, I think the habit of scrutinizing my own stuff comes from it being used against me. But then I also, because we do have this public platform and we do have people listening, I do feel a sense of responsibility for what people do in response to what we say.
But that's sitting in their business. If we say
something that makes someone treat someone badly, I can't not feel a little bit of responsibility for that.
Okay. I don't feel responsibility because I feel like what we are doing here is sitting in a very high frequency. What we're talking about and what we are trying to model, the conversations that we have are very much true north self material. So knowing that my intentions for what I am saying are not meant to hurt anybody, but rather to heal, what somebody chooses to do with that information is their business. All I can control is that I have set the intention that what I am saying to you, what I'm modeling for everyone, saying for everyone, is in their highest good as well as my own. And it's to continue my path of living, my path of learning. And so then I am not going to be speaking my truth or standing up for me if I am filtering that through the lens of, well, what could somebody do with this information? Now, I'm not saying that people haven't used it and manipulated it in the wrong way or that they won't. But then it is my hope that the person that they do that to maybe is also listening and can find that strength to find their true north to get out.
Or to call them out.
So
I think one of the differences that I'm hearing, and you can tell me if how close I am to the mark here, is that I believe that we can have the intention to speak healing into this podcast, but still not execute on that speaking in a way that is ideal. Meaning, like, say we spend 3 episodes talking about why it's okay to be selfish. Mm-hmm. And then somebody takes that and actually does decide not to give a shit about their spouse or their kid and just completely retreat into I am the only thing that matters. Mm-hmm. And then engages in behaviors that cause those people harm. And let's say that actually does happen. That didn't happen. That hasn't happened to my knowledge. I've just been sitting in what if,
yes.
It's all been in my head. But let's say that actually happened and it got back to us that someone says, hey, my spouse listened to this and because of the things you said, that was their defense for why they started acting worse towards me. Could we not take that as feedback that maybe there was a better way to have expressed the same thing we were trying to express during those episodes? Not that we did something wrong, but you don't think that would be good actionable feedback to pivot in our
Well, I would certainly reflect
delivery
on it. I would go back and look at what was said and how that particular person interpreted it. But I'm not going to make it my responsibility if that person chose to use it in that way.
Would you make it your responsibility to alter the way that you move forward to prevent other people from interpreting it that way?
No.
What if we got 12 people who all came to us and said the same thing?
But then I feel like if we're really getting that many people, then we're really not in our highest good. Like we are not.
Or maybe we are, and we just don't know how to say it in a way that communicates it properly.
Then what are we doing, right? Then why do we have a podcast?
Trying to figure that out.
Yeah. So I wouldn't change. It goes back to your loud chewing. My dogs are barking. Sorry. It goes back to the loud chewing thing where I don't want to change you if you're a loud chewer. And I know this is a heavier example. There's a lot more emotions than just chewing, but I don't like everything in this linear world has a cause or has a reaction, right? Everything has to have this equal reaction. So if what we say causes a reaction for someone else, that was meant to happen. And yes, that might hurt somebody, and I'm not condoning it and I'm not excusing it, but everything happens for a reason. And I feel like the fact that we're even having this podcast, sharing this information, which is incredibly vulnerable for me to do in the first place, because other than you, there has been nobody else that I have had these conversations with. And all of a sudden, like now the whole world knows Abby talks to her cat. Everybody. Yeah. Right. So, so I don't like take what we do lightly. I honor this space and I honor the people that are listening. And so I don't want to change the way I show up, even though it's affected somebody else negatively. And that sounds the wrong way to say it. Now, that doesn't mean I won't meet you where you are and realize that I could explain things differently, but I'm not going to take back what I said. I might just say it better.
Yeah. That's what I was getting at. I don't want to take back any of the things that we've said, but if we've said something, I hate to use this word, but right, in a way that caused someone to do wrong, then I feel like that could be feedback for us to update how we say the thing that is and always was right.
Yes.
So that the message gets through more clearly and doesn't leave room for people to interpret it into doing something wrong.
Right.
Not apologizing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if someone does take what we say and use it to hurt somebody, that action is on them. That's not on us.
Yes.
Like you're saying. And I don't want to say that it would be our fault. But then if we hear that happens, I feel like for us to just throw up our hands and be like, oh, that was your own shit to deal with, and not even investigate if there was a way we could have said the same truth we're saying, but in a way that was more clearly communicated.
Yes,
then we're doing everyone a disservice.
I do agree with that, because I, like, me loving you and me loving our audience, I want to take that into consideration. Like, I'm not just going to throw my hands up. Like, I'm not, who's that guy? Stern, Richard Stern. What's the
Howard Stern?
Howard Stern, like that, where he's just like, he does not care what comes out of his mouth or who it offends, and that's his personality, and it works for him. That is not me. That is not us. Like, I very much have love for what I'm saying and how I'm saying it to everybody that's listening, and so yes, I do want to make that clarification. It's not a matter of I don't really care how you feel about this, but I still want to meet you where you are and not take away the fact that it was meant to happen, but I will do it in a better way. Yes. So, but what I'm hearing you say though is, so you've circled back purely on baseless projection, like sitting in the future of some event that has not even happened.
Yeah, and it's not a new habit. Like, it's an old habit that I've been conditioned to be in through receiving critique from people whose opinions I care about. And so then I just scrutinize everything I say to, I guess, protect myself from that potentially happening and leave no room for that type of scrutiny.
Can I ask you this?
Because, yes, you can.
These people whose opinions matter so much to you always hurt you. So why do you place so much weight in them?
I wouldn't say always.
Okay.
And I think that's a big differentiation to make. Because I think if there was somebody in my life who always hurts me, at this point in my life, they would just be not in my life anymore.
Yes. Good point.
And I continue to do life with these people. But what was your question?
When you put a lot of weight in their opinion.
Yes.
And yet a lot of times they still trigger you. Not every time. Yes. I get that, because yes, you are doing life with them. So I know it's not all the time, but so why do you put so much weight in them if it's a constant trigger? What I'm asking
Why
is,
do
what
I
are you
care so
getting?
much?
Yeah, what are you getting out of this? Are they helping you hold a mirror up to yourself? Do you have an aha moment, or do you just literally find yourself defending yourself all the time?
Here's the thing about when I really actually take the feedback for what it is, it's almost always accurate and insightful. At the end of the day, if I get my ego out of the way, it does help. Mm-hmm. It really does show me my blind spots. It really does help me to see things from a different perspective.
Okay.
And that's useful for me continuing to refine the thing that I'm doing. And so I don't even really mind the feedback. Well, I can't say that because I just talked about how I do everything I can to protect myself from the feedback. But when I'm in the place of acceptance, I don't mind it. Mm-hmm. The problem isn't that I get feedback or critique. The problem is that I'm triggered by it.
And so you're not in a place of acceptance to hear what's really being said. You're sitting in your trigger.
Through it. Yes, yeah. I get triggered, and then I have to have self-talk moments, and I have to move past it, and I have to do all these exercises I picked up over the years to get through the part where I'm triggered and defensive to actually hear what's being said, which is then almost always actually helpful feedback.
Okay. Well, this is good because I want to point out that you actually can get, like, you are at a point in your life where you've practiced enough. The trigger hasn't gone away, but you now know I'm triggered. You know the tools to process. Not that it doesn't hurt.
Right.
You go through the process. Like, that's growth.
Yeah, well, then my dad would do this thing, and I said this in his eulogy, where, did you see that we both reached out to do something at the same time? I said this in his eulogy, but a lot of our conversations when I was a little kid, before his miraculous, life-changing, I'm going to stop being physically abusive moment, was him at his computer, and we would approach him at his desk and say something. And if we got an answer, we did not get eye contact. We just got the answer. And sometimes they were just questions, because you go to your parents who are infinitely knowledgeable about everything, and you just have a question. You don't know, they know, so you ask them. And one of the things that my dad would do is he would find a way to answer technically, exactly, literally what we said, but not answer the question that we're asking. Because he thought it was funny. And I do too, because I do that to people all the time. And but then we would have to reword the question, and if we wanted to really get the answer we were after. And it was just, to me, it was just like a game. Because then at some point I would find myself walking up to his desk, phrasing the question in my head. No, he's going to say this. Phrasing my question differently. No, he's going to say this. And then eventually, by the time I got to the desk, I had the actual, and it was the most direct, concise, clear, he had trained me to be clear and to speak impeccably and say what I mean. Mm-hmm. And then I had gotten to a point where I didn't even need to ask him anymore, because getting the question clear, oftentimes the answer is embedded within the question. And so by never answering the question, he taught me to not need him to answer the question. And I appreciate that. I don't know if that was his intention or if it was just, a natural consequence. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, knowing that being very certain that I'm going to be critiqued has trained me to critique myself. I don't know that that's a bad thing. I think I still need to develop the ability to do it in the moment instead of post hoc, where then I have to come back and loop around and spend another podcast, But I do appreciate the learning there, which is, if you're going to make a claim or you're going to play with an idea, maybe get it to a certain level of airtightness before you throw it out there and start influencing people with it, because it may not hold as much water as you think it does or want it to. Mm-hmm. And that's valuable. It's a valuable thing to be able to do. But there's also pain. And I think when I do that, it's hard for me to tell whether it's chasing the best way to say something or running from the pain of being told I didn't say it the best way, or both.
Two things here. I want to be very clear that your self-critique sounds different than negative self-talk. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I'm critiquing what I said. I'm not critiquing myself.
Okay, but for people listening, like what you were saying is you're not harsh to yourself. You might be critiquing, but in a loving way.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
because you said you think self-critiquing is okay, and I just want to make sure, like, it's not if it isn't in the name of love and light.
Well, yeah, and it all depends on, like, you have to be very careful with your language. Like, when you critique yourself or find yourself engaged in self-talk, I encourage people to write it down. Mm-hmm. First of all, because writing it down with your hands takes time, and you have to, like, spend time on it. And once you get it on paper and you can look at it and read it back to yourself, it kind of, the thought then has to defend itself against you, because it's not you anymore, it's its own thing. And you can look at it and be like, oh, that's not even close to true, you know? Mm-hmm. But it also kind of shows you what language you're using. So when I'm playing chess and I make a really stupid move, I will laugh at myself, and then but I don't say, I'll say it out loud, and my wife catches me all the time. I don't say, oh, I made a stupid move. I say, oh, I'm so stupid. Mm-hmm. Every single time. Like, oh, I'm so dumb. I'm so bad at this. Why do I do this? And so there's a difference between critiquing the move you made and critiquing the person who made it.
Yes.
And that is huge. And so I think it's okay to critique your output. Mm-hmm. Because that's what you're doing. You're not critiquing yourself. You're critiquing the thing you made, which, again, like, that, it's okay. It needs to stand. It needs to be able to withstand some scrutiny if it's gonna be taken seriously. So you may as well be the person to do that instead of waiting for other people to. I just have the benefit of having some very good scrutinizers in my life.
Okay, so the other thing I hear you saying, which my mind's going red flag, is I feel like you are seeking perfection in how we say things.
Maybe clarity? What I don't want to do is I don't want to say something and then have it come back to me that somebody else heard something that I didn't mean to say.
Okay, this triggers me.
Why?
Because you have a vocabulary that is beautiful. You had a dad that trained you how to exactly your story, just narrow down this question to get your own answer, precise, to the point. You're very eloquent in how you write and how you speak. And it's very threatening to me because I have a lot of insecurity about my own language. Like that, I didn't read much as a child, and I know you get a lot of your language development from reading, and I wasn't encouraged to read. I played outside, I played in the dirt, I didn't read. I was a very smart kid in school, straight A kid in school, but I also grew up in very rural America where we got the basics, And so I have always felt out of place with my lexicon in a way, and how sometimes even how I say things. And sometimes I feel like, going back to critiquing the person or the action, I will say to myself, you sound so dumb. You are not smart by what you just said. And so I constantly struggle on getting deep enough for the soul mind to speak, but the ego mind staying conscious enough to say it in a really pretty way. And so when you say, like, we could explain things better, I get triggered because Figment, my effing lizard, says to me, see, there's validation right there. You don't speak well enough because people don't understand you. So that's where I go with it. And so you say perfection, and it's like, I've struggled my whole life with perfection because I don't want to be seen as unsmart. I don't want to be seen as unsmart, unintelligent.
That's probably my favorite sentence ever. I don't want to be seen as unsmart.
See, I can't even say it correctly when I'm trying to say what I'm saying.
That was beautifully put, Abby.
So, like, I don't want to see, like, what is this phrase? Like, better to be thought a fool than to prove it. Mm-hmm. And so I have operated on, I need to be perfect so I don't prove that I'm a fool. And so that's where I go with it sometimes when you circle back. It's like, I feel like you're saying, and you're not, right? But, well, and it's not even you saying it. It's Figment saying to me and trying to validate to me everything that I think about myself, which is, I am not smart enough to do this. So,
Do you really think you're not smart enough?
You know, I used to truly believe it, really. And then with all this personal work and then validation from my guides, and the closer I get connected to spirit and the more I speak on this information, the more I teach on this topic, and like the more I'm validated that that is a bunch of malarkey, like not true at all. And so I really talk a lot about people finding their evidence so that when their lizard shows up in full force, like you actually have real evidence to like flick that little fucker off your shoulder and be like, no, not today. And so I do now, because of these experiences, my connection to spirit, things that have been validated and proved to me, and things people have said to me after I've taught a class with them and how they've circled back, is hard evidence against I'm not smart enough to do this. So I still have the thoughts. They still obviously get triggered, but now if I can do the work and process through it, kind of like, you're saying where you get triggered, you need to do the work and process, I can go and, it's not that I totally buy it, but I'm a lot closer than where I was.
You know what is fascinating that just kind of hit me out of nowhere while you were saying that? You and I are operating out of the exact same insecurity.
That's so weird, because I'm like, Ryan is so smart and I'm so dumb.
I was homeschooled, and I was homeschooled I went to elementary school to a certain point, and then I was homeschooled from 5th grade on. And this is common among homeschoolers, that we all feel like by default we're dumb, just because we were raised in this idea that you go to school to get smart. And if you don't go to school, you're not smart. And so we all kind of had this like shared unspoken understanding that we were all the short bus, like we were the kids' table.
And I have the perception that all homeschoolers are really smart.
Well, that's what I was leading to, was then you compensate. You say, okay, I'm going to fucking prove to the world that I'm not dumb just because I was homeschooled.
Okay.
And so what you're doing is you're sitting in everyone else's business.
Yes.
But that's why homeschoolers tend to be overachievers. Either they're overachievers, and by the time they graduate high school, they've got like 4 semesters of community college under their belt and an associate's degree, or they really do buy into the narrative and they don't even try. And then you have people who are in 5th grade and can't read because they just told themselves, I'm stupid, I'm homeschooled, I'm never going to be anything, so I'm not going to try. But you don't really see anything in between. Right? And so I felt the need to be able to prove that I was at least as smart as the normal kids who actually went to school to get their education. And so I went overtime, because grades don't matter, because the transcript's not real. No one cares if you got an A if your mom's the one they gave it to. She's also the one that thinks that you could do anything and comes to all your soccer games. So like, Of course she's good. At least that's what you think the world thinks about you, right?
Right.
And so I also had this idea that I'm not smart. I am intrinsically, by default, my baseline is not smart. And the only way to change that narrative is to cover it up with a bunch of just stuff that makes me look smart. Being well read, knowing a lot about a lot of different subjects, a lot of different topics, always having some just fact that nobody knew that I can throw out there and make it look like the vocabulary, all of it. It all came from needing to cover up my feelings of inadequacy from just the fact that I was homeschooled. As a matter of fact, I even wrote that, like, if you go to my personal website, it's just ryanbayron.com, and the second paragraph says, I'm very good at what I do because the relentless pursuit of excessive excellence is how I cope with my deep feelings of crippling inadequacy from unresolved daddy issues.
Okay.
So it's funny that we both started at the same place. I'm not smart. But then we moved in completely opposite directions.
Yes, and this is what I love about perception, and this is the whole hysterectomy theory, like, coming to life, right? Like, I just assume that my perception is you are incredibly smart, and that you're smart, but not in an arrogant way. It's just you're a smart person, and you carry that with you, that confidence. And here I am hearing you say that you're not, or you don't feel that way. Not that you're not, that you don't feel that way. And it's just like, that piece of information changes so much. It's interesting.
Right. Because now you know that when I do something that exemplifies that I might be smart, the motivation to incorporate that into my being was just to make sure people don't assume I'm stupid.
Yeah. You know what it does for me is it makes me have, knowing this information gives myself, like I'm able to give myself more grace.
Yeah.
It's like we have the same base.
Yes, and you also are probably the only person in your life who would ever think that you're not smart.
I don't know.
I have. Look at this.
Oh, he's grabbing something.
I've got a journal.
Okay. Oh, one you kept?
Thanks to one of our patrons. Look at this.
I love that one.
You love that one?
You were writing in that when we first started meeting back up.
I'm about to turn to the page that I was on. Because normally if I meet with somebody up for coffee, and this is a big giveaway because now anyone who ever meets me up for coffee is going to look for this. If I bring a pad and paper to that conversation, it already means I think you're smart. Because it means I'm going to learn something. I expect to learn something, and I expect there to be nuggets that if I don't write down, I won't remember, and I'm going to want to.
Interesting.
So the fact that I brought pen and paper to every single one of our meetings right there tells you that I've always had the opinion that you were smart and someone I could learn from.
Wow.
And then a page would normally look like this.
Okay.
Like
big
a couple
text,
things,
a few
big text,
things.
like this, like one or two things were said, and I wanted to jot them down. And this is what that page looked like.
Holy cow! That's my page.
That's your page.
Oh my gosh!
So right there in the middle.
That's a full page.
It says ab.
Yep.
Because that's what I used to call you.
Ab.
And it's like the things are upside down, things are sideways, things are in boxes. I drew lines to separate things from other things, and one thing like
space is filled.
There's Marianne Williamson, Byron Katie, anniversary for an idea, Martha Beck, ask questions, something about healing and a gift, and you could tell I was excited because it's sloppy.
Yeah.
And you know how I am with handwriting.
Yes.
I did not. There are like 18 different fonts, and none of them are legible. And there's like a drawing of a book. Yeah, it was, and that is what's happening in my brain every time we talk.
Interesting.
You are one of very few people in my mind that I interact with that way.
Interesting. I don't see that at all. That's interesting.
You'd be surprised how many times I speak highly of people in my life to have that response.
Huh. Well, I guess it's probably just hard for people to see themselves in the eyes. Like, that's hard for me to accept, but that goes back to, obviously, then you are providing evidence against the opposite that Figment's telling me, and I'm like there's this battle. Like, is that really true? Is that really what he means? You know?
Well, the other thing that I was actually pondering this earlier this week is that when we were talking about those drawings that I saved, I had the realization that the molecules that made up the person who drew those, none of those are me. It was so long ago that they have since all dissipated and are everywhere else.
Yes.
You know, like I am literally a completely different set of matter than that person.
Right.
And sometimes just acknowledging that is it also a good tool I can use to detach from previous versions of myself. So like if you, like the you that went to school and wasn't getting the education you think maybe you should have gotten, well, you're very literally physically not that person anymore. And so you can even go as far as, if it helps you with your narrative, to say maybe she's not smart but I am, because I've done XYZ since then. And I have this input from these people, I have these experiences, and who I am today is someone who is as smart as I can choose to make myself be. Or maybe you're smarter just because you have more life experience that little girl didn't have.
Well, there's definitely a lot of truth in that. But this is the one thing that's held me back from writing my book.
Not feeling smart enough?
That my grammar is so poor that it will not.
But there are editors. There are people who make it look like you know how to speak. That's their whole job.
They're going to have to rewrite the whole book. Interesting. Yeah. So, but yes, you're right. I need to work on this.
Well, then also here's one more thing.
I didn't realize this was such a big thing. Thank you.
I didn't either. That's what she said.
Thank you.
So I went to, I have met Matt and Kim a couple times. If you don't know who that is, they're a couple who do music and concerts and things. And in one of the conversations that we had, Matt was talking about how they, I think Kim, like Matt is on keyboard and Kim is on drums. That's their whole thing. It's just the two of them. They don't have like a whole studio band that doesn't get credit. It's just the two of them. Mm-hmm. And Kim didn't really know drums before they did their first show. And they talked about how they feel like Matt feels like he should be an amazing pianist, and Kim feels like she should be an amazing drummer, because everybody that you see recording albums and doing shows and all that stuff, they're really good at their thing, and that's why they're the people on the stage. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, hey, why don't we just be what we are? And actually, now they intentionally keep their stuff simple. A, because it's easier to get stuck in your head when it's simple, but B, because it's accessible. Mm-hmm. Like you look at somebody who's an amazing musician, and then in your mind, they are in the amazing musician slot. Mm-hmm. It's untouchable. It's unreachable. You could practice your entire life, and you may get half as good as them. So you put them on a pedestal, and then instantly there's a disconnect. Mm-hmm. But if anybody who's been playing piano for a month can go to any Matt and Kim song and just sound out how to play those things. And they do it on purpose because it's accessible. And I feel like one of your strengths in the way that you speak, Abby, is that you are accessible.
I didn't think you were going to circle that back to me. Wow.
Because you say things, and I feel like what you meant to say is what came out, and it's clear and it's concise. And that's something that I actually aspire to, because I feel like my words get in the way of what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. You know, if there is one thing that has come out of this limiting belief that I am grateful for, is that I do not say things unless I mean to say them. And I still worry about how I say them, but I don't do a lot of talking. I mean, and almost anybody in my life will tell you that. I don't do a lot of talking. But when I do, I really mean what I say.
I have so much admiration for that in people. Anybody who you can say that about, I am going to have it's almost envy. I am not known for being a man of few words.
No. But that is one of your gifts.
It is. I have to really work hard to see it as a gift. Because I have a way of talking myself in circles. And then I've said a bunch of words, and what I said could have been summed up in one sentence. And I'm lucky to have people in my life who can then sum it up in one sentence. But I just don't. I just don't have it in me to not just tell you 14 stories to make a point. But it is a grass is always greener situation, because I wish that I did. And also, one thing you just said that I do not want to miss. You said the phrase, one thing that came out of this limiting belief that I'm grateful for is. Mm-hmm. We could make a whole workshop around that. You know?
Well, that talks about rewriting your stories. That came from me rewriting my stories.
And it's gratitude. And even though you know it's a limiting belief, and we have very strong feelings about, we have negative connotation with limiting beliefs, and we encourage people to identify them and kill them. But you're still able to pull gratitude out of something like a negative belief.
Yes.
Limiting belief. Just like I experience emotional pain because of my own junk when someone critiques what I say. Yet I'm able to hear the critique for what it is and actually benefit from it anyway. And what I need to work on is not trying to protect myself from that pain. And also figuring out why that pain happens and see if I can actually rise above the ego that's feeling threatened when that happens. And that's my work to do. But that's something that we both said, is there's a thing that we paint as negative, but there's also something to be taken from it that's beneficial. that you can kill the thing but still benefit from the side effects of that thing having been a thing, even though it was a negative thing. Negative? Yeah, we'll just say negative.
Yes. So, back to, the Vox, I appreciate you having this conversation. And I didn't recognize it at first as you sitting in other people's business. I was just triggered. Isn't that interesting?
You didn't initially recognize it as? Because when you first presented your hypothesis, it was basically a picture of me sitting in some very specific people's business.
But it took me a little while to get there. My initial reaction was, this is really pissing me off. Why? That's really strong. It wasn't that. I wasn't angry about it. I was frustrated that we had to keep circling back. And so I wanted to know why I was getting frustrated about it.
Oh, because again, when you say something, you've already done the work to make sure it is what you mean.
Yeah.
And so for me to come back and say, I don't think we did that right. You're like, well, of course I did. I wouldn't have let it come out of my mouth if it wasn't already vetted 14,000 times.
For the most part, yes. No, sometimes I get caught off guard.
So I'm by saying we need to say more words, I'm challenging something that you hold as a part of your identity. And that's a good thing to you. And that's me saying, it's not that good of a thing.
Right.
So I can see that being something that would be triggering for you. And then me even wanting to do that comes out of my own insecurity, being like, I didn't sound smart enough in that last one. Give it more words.
This is where I feel like I didn't want to sit in your business about this, and I didn't want to just assume what you were doing, but I care about you and I love you as my friend. So if I could in some way point something out to you that would help get you to your higher place, then that is my business. Like, I want to do that. And so that's why I was like, well, so I went from like figuring myself out, and then I went to, well, why, like, what's Ryan's motivation? Why would he want to do that? And just trying to, within the context that I have in my experiences with you, try to put that together, which is where I came up with my hunch. And then that is also driven by my guides, like saying, yep, you need to talk to him about it. I'm like, oh, okay. And then being able to present that to you where it's like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And of course, tell me if I'm wrong, because ultimately I don't know. But then that also, like, my hope and my goal in saying that and presenting it to you in that way is also that I very much love you. And so I want to understand why you're doing this, not only from my own experience, but also, are you doing this for your highest good, or is there something else that you don't see that I want to present to you?
And I'm so glad that you did, because there was truth in it. I mean, like I said, there have been times in the last 27 episodes where I have started down a rant that was triggered by how I know one person to be who I know is going to hear this. And then in those moments, I'm talking to that person. And every single time I've done that, I would get a text that's like, hey, I listened to this podcast and this thing, and then of course I'm like, yes, it got through to him. But then I was hijacking everyone else's time when I could have just gone straight to that person and said, hey, here's what I think. Because that conversation happened anyway. It was just that this podcast was an impetus, but is this the right place to start that?
Sure.
And so for you to open that up and kind of say, hey, here's what I think is going on, I was like immediately defensive. And of course, when I get defensive, I recognize it. I'm like, okay, well, what am I defending against? And for me, my personal history, my trends is that when I feel like I'm getting defensive, I'm defending against something I know is true. And I don't want to cope with the truth because it's a truth that hurts. And so I'll defend against the pain, not the thing itself.
It was really hard for me to share that with you because I felt it was going to be painful. And I didn't.
I'm glad you did anyway.
I didn't want to do that, but I didn't feel like I had a bad intention.
No.
In doing it. And I was hoping and having faith that you would hear it for what it was and not be mad at me for it. Does that make sense?
And I did. And that was one of the things I tell myself is I remind myself of who I experience you to be. As someone who has never had anything but my highest good in your mind and in your heart.
Yes.
And so if something does hurt, it's automatically what am I going to say? Of the menu of things that I could choose to believe about that, among that list is not Abby's trying to hurt me. There's not Abby's being malicious, or she's just mad so she's trying to hurt me so that she'll feel better. None of that was there. And so then it was like, okay, I'm experiencing pain, but that's my pain. And that just comes back to like just noticing yourself. Like even in this conversation, one of the things I learned, I think I said this in the last episode I grazed over it, was my tell for when I'm being defensive, and I don't think this is specific to me. I wouldn't say it's universal, but I think that it applies to a lot of people, is if you say a bunch of things, I'll pick out one that doesn't matter and has nothing to do with what you're saying and then argue with it. You know, like I'm listening for things that I can disagree with and be right. Even though they're the things that are not even what you're trying to say. Like it's a little side note where it's like, okay, fine, whatever. But what I said still stands, right? And I even did that at the beginning of this fucking podcast. You were like, there are people who always hurt you. I'm like, they don't always hurt me. And then you did that. You just moved through it. You're like, okay, fine, you're right. But here's the point. And then but I had to do that little nitpicky thing. And to me, that is defensive behavior. That's a defensive thing to zone in on. That's not even the point. I know that's not the point. But I just like,
but it's what you can control.
My ego feels better if I can argue with something and be right, you know? And so then I was thinking to myself, like, okay, well, I feel like Abby's wrong because her hypothesis is not 100% accurate, and here are all the things that are wrong with it. And then I was like, well, okay, well, of course it's not accurate because she doesn't see my heart and mind. And that's not even the point. That's not the point. The point is that she's concerned that maybe I'm using my platform in a way that's not in the highest good of not only us, but our audience. And then it goes to, well, am I? Is there truth in that? And the fact that I even was defensive against it in the first place signals to me that, yeah, there's truth in there. Because if it wasn't true, I would have nothing to defend against. I'm really resilient to non-truth. Like you can come at me with something, and if I know that you're baseless, like it's not something that's founded in reality, I'll be like, okay, well, here's the real story. Have a nice day.
Well, and then that would be my cue to dig deeper. Like, okay, Ryan validated that that's not true, so it's got to be something else. It's got to come. So then I would come back on me and figure out maybe it was me doing that, right? Like I would flip it. And so, you know, we need to teach a workshop on relationships, because if everybody related this way, wow.
I feel like this episode is a workshop on relationships.
I think so.
A real-time workshop on relationships.
Because it's like all of a sudden I'm like in major love and light, vibrating really high with you right now because we've like cleared the air on this.
And that's the other thing is like you had reservations against even bringing it up to me. So the fact that you did it all is huge.
It is, and I will say I'm proud of myself for that, because it is my experience that if I were to point out something in you that you were quote unquote doing wrong, I say that because I don't know that that's true, but if I were making the assumption that you were doing something wrong and I bring that up to you, it is my experience that is the worst possible thing I could do. I'm a horrible person and I need to be shut down immediately.
Because when you've done that to certain other people in your life, that's what they told you in response.
I was raised that way. You don't, there's something wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with me.
Right.
And then in, yes, multiple relationships,
See, now there are people in my audience that act that way, and I really want to be like, if you have a tendency to do this, so I can have those conversations offline.
Yes, but see, having the experience that I do with you, well, it is incredibly scary. You do also hold the space for me to practice standing up for myself, using my voice, speaking at least my truth, and sharing what I'm getting out of it or how I'm experiencing you making those choices to you in a safe way. Like I realized that it could potentially hurt you, but I still felt safe enough to say it.
That's huge. Like this is what's happening here is like, if we look at the chain of events, Ryan was operating out of insecurity and covering it according to his habits for how he copes with that. Abby was operating out of insecurity and being triggered by Ryan's coping mechanisms for his insecurity.
Yes.
Abby felt frustration. Ryan was a safe enough person still for Abby to feel like she could talk to Ryan about it, and Abby did. While talking about it, Abby presented what she thinks might have been the case, but opened up the floor for correction.
Yes.
Owning the fact that she didn't have the full story, and also owning that her frustration had more to do with her than him. Ryan then said, hey, I'm triggered by this, but that's because there's truth. So let me engage with the truth here. Responded and said, yeah, you're right. I did go back and say, here are all the holes in your hypothesis, which again was just me continuing to work through my own defensiveness in real time. But eventually I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I think this is... And then that was over Vox, so there was no face-to-face contact, there was no facial expression, no body language. It's a little bit safer to do it that way. And then we met over Zoom and had a little bit more of a conversation, just enough to be able to clear the air. And now we're hashing it out in a very, like, we're emotionally removed. All the triggering has happened. That whole process is a summation of just about everything that we've talked about so far about relationships. Noticing when you're triggered, having the tools to diffuse yourself, owning what's yours, owning that you don't know other people's stuff, being a safe enough person to receive that feedback, looking for the truth in spite of the pain that it causes when you hear it, rupture and repair. And like this is what it is. Abby and Ryan have a podcast. Abby and Ryan are not professionals at having a podcast because Ryan can't remember how to record the episode every single time. Abby and Ryan both sound really smart, and Abby and Ryan both have insecurities around how smart they are and are covering that up in their own ways.
Yes.
Abby and Ryan sound like we have... Everyone says we have a great chemistry, we have a great rapport, they love hearing us talk to each other, and here we are getting in fights on the weeks leading up to the actual recordings.
Right.
And the crazy thing about it is that, like, we can do this because of the nature of our friendship. We're not married. We don't live together. It doesn't affect you if I don't take out the trash.
Yep.
But it's just like how, like, my kid is 2. And for him, unstructured playtime is one of the most important things for me because he can create his own world. He has a sense of control and autonomy, and but then he has these little characters, and then when he plays with them, there's conflict, and they have to save each other, or they have to save the day, or they have to share, or one of his toys put another toy in timeout this morning. And he goes to his wrist and he said, set a timer for minutes, because that's what I do. When I put something in timeout, I talk to my watch. And he's practicing these things and he's role playing them. And there are no stakes, but yet he's still flexing the muscles. He's still getting the emotional workout on how to actually deal with conflict and how to actually deal with some of the situations he's role playing with his characters. And so because we have the relationship that we do, this is like a great practice grounds for then we can take those into our marriages. We can take it into our relationships with our parents or with any other type of problematic things.
Yeah. And that's how you practice. You practice by doing.
Yes.
And so find your safe person, which you are for me, so I can actually practice.
Because we are each other's sandboxes.
Well, right. Because now I will, like, okay, I gained some confidence. I gained some knowledge in practicing this conflict with you. So naturally, I'm going to go take that into another conflict. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But then again, I also do want to say that, like, if you hear this, or if you have that type of relationship, or you have these experiences that boost your confidence to be able to say things, and then you go speak your truth to someone who then turns around and continues to make it your problem, it's still okay to have boundaries and barriers and to not be vulnerable with them.
Absolutely.
It is still okay. Like, we're not trying to say this is why everybody should do this like this all the time, because some people are not safe. And this whole thing is predicated on that you and I are safe for each other first.
Absolutely.
None of this would have happened.
Correct.
If those two weren't the case.
Yes. Agreed.
We've been doing this for an hour.
I know. I just looked.
That's what she said.
Crazy. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what you're grateful for?
So, it's part gratitude, part plug.
What?
So we, coming up very soon, we are interviewing Tony Eastless. He is I don't know exactly what his label is these days, but for best description, I would call him a medical medium. And we're going to interview him, talk about how he discovered his gifts, and just how he aligns with the work that we do and what we're trying to present to our audience. And so I'm really excited about that. But I had a session with him today. It's not my first one, but I had a session with him today. And since we left our retreat with Kathleen, we've been talking, she talked a lot about self-actualizing statements. Did I say that right? Self-actualizing. Yes, you did. That's hard to get out.
Not if you're homeschooled.
Yes.
See what I did there? You're smart. You're very smart, Abby.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, she talked a lot about how important those are. And we talk a lot about the power of words and the frequency of words. And so one that I got a hit on when I was there at that retreat was trust yourself. Like, I trust myself, having to say that. Like, they're asking me to trust in myself, and I need to keep saying, I trust myself. So, normally my self mantras, actualization statements, never, I'll write one, I hang it up, nothing really ever sticks. This one sticks like Gorilla Glue. Like, this baby's not coming off of me. Like, it's
just presented
to trust myself, and it's presented in every single moment. So, since I've been really working on this statement and really trying to embody that I trust myself and meditating with it in my raw morning ritual every day, I'm getting a lot of messages, because when I do that, I'm very connected to spirit. And so having my session with Tony today, yes, I got a lot of new information, but so much of it was just validating the trust that I already had in myself for the information that I've been receiving. Like, it was a validation of, Abby, you really do know what you're doing. This isn't made up. This stuff is happening, and you're trusting yourself, and so they're giving you more because now, you're honoring the information, whereas before I wasn't, because I'm like, yeah, I'm making that up. Like, I just didn't, Right. And when I start to see myself as one of them, they're like, okay, here you go. We have more for you. We've been waiting. And so Tony validated all of that for me today. And so I'm grateful for, I think I said this to you prior to recording, is I've gotten more information that's been helpful and validated from Tony than any other person I've connected with, healer, guide, medium, whomever. He's had the best information. And so I'm grateful for being open to the people in my community that said, hey, you might benefit from seeing this person. Tony was not on my radar. I had no idea who Tony was, until someone said, you might benefit from Tony. And I was really hesitant for a long time, but I trusted the person giving the information. And so I sat with it for a while, and then I thought, okay, this person has my highest good in mind. So if they think that I would get a lot from this, then I should trust that. And I did. And then I went and saw Tony, and I was blown away the very first time. And since then, that's been my experience. It hasn't altered. So I'm grateful for the people that are in my life that really are willing to stand up and say, hey, I see this for you as being a very good thing. And they saying that to me, whether or not I'm going to be receptive to it, I'm just grateful that they still try and they still do. And it's like planting a seed. That's your little seed. And I know it will turn into something that I harvest, but I'm just grateful because I wouldn't have had that experience without those seeds.
And did you say that today's session was 2.5 hours?
2.5 hours.
Did it feel like 2.5 hours?
No. And the first time he saw me, he said, you had so much fear, anxiety. He goes, there was weights on your shoulder. I saw physical weights on your shoulder. And he says, now your aura is so bright and so light. I can extend my hands all the way out and I can still feel you. Because normally you can feel people's aura when you're close to him. This is a healer. But he had his arms fully extended and he still felt me. That's big in what we're talking about, if anybody's familiar with auras. So he's like, you've done the work. You've really done the work. I'm like, yes. Well, I am.
Yes, I have.
I am doing the work. So
right.
Anyway, that's a long gratitude today, but just the people that stay in their business, but they stay in their business and love me by planting seeds.
Yeah, and continuing to just nudge you in certain directions.
Yeah.
That's huge.
How about
and
you?
for Tony, I'm super excited about Tony.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm going to get to see him before we get... I'll try to make it happen. No, I will make it happen. There we go. Right, the right language.
Just plan time.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an hour.
Afterwards. And then am I going to need to like decompress afterwards?
You might. I'm exhausted because he does work. Well, he'll explain his process, but he did some work on me energetically, and I'm like, between that and this, I've given a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ready for a nap.
Yep.
Yeah. So, your gratitude.
My gratitude is also both a gratitude and a plug. How weird is that? So while you were spending 2.5 hours with Tony, I was spending an hour with a different group of people who are doing something exactly like what we're doing. 2 people get together, have a weekly podcast. They got a tribe.
Awesome.
Paying members, private Facebook group, weekly calls, all of it.
Crazy.
So I joined that group, and it's actually, the podcast is called Zen Parenting Radio.
Ah, yeah.
And it's a married couple, Todd and Kathy, who, because of a verbal typo between me and my friend, I can't help but to call them Tad and Coffee. and so I joined their group yesterday. And really, I told him straight up. I was like, "This is investigative. I don't know how to say that word. This is
You're very smart,
exploratory for me. I am. Thank you. I was homeschooled, and I was like, I have a thing where we have the exact same model that you do, and I want to see how you do it and how it all works and what the customer experience is and all that kind of stuff. And also, I just think it's time to join the group. And so they actually had their call right. Like this call was 1 to 2. Their call is noon to 1. So I literally hopped from that to this, but there were maybe 30 people on the call, and it was great. It was a great experience. He actually, I didn't expect him to do this, but he plugged our podcasts.
Awesome.
And they record all their calls and put them out there for people to listen to. And so, I guess I'm just hitting you back, Tad.
Yeah.
So it's Zen Parenting Radio. The thing is called Zen. Why am I blinking so much today? This is the worst plug ever. I can't even remember what it's called. It's
Zen Parenting Radio?
Zen Parenting Radio is the fucking podcast.
And then there's a name of
and then
there's
the group. They have a thing that's called the Tribe, but it's just a men's group. And then they have this other thing that's their paid Facebook group. I'm looking it up. I'm just gonna look it up.
Well, and you've shared a lot. You've shared a lot that you've gotten from that with me personally, but then also here on this podcast. So I'm
Team Zen.
So now I am gonna have to go.
And then you sign up, and then they have their calls. I think it's a couple times a month, and those are called Zen Talks. And you come with your questions, and then you can talk about them. And it's really real and raw and vulnerable and personal, and it's really supportive, and it's a good group. And when I joined the group, he was like, "Hey everybody, we have a new member," and then there was just this waterfall of just welcome to the group. You're gonna love it here. And so it was just a really neat experience, and I don't know why it took me so long to join the group, but I did. And I'm grateful for them and for Tad and Coffee. And yeah, I'm still kind of lit up from that whole thing. So
yay, that's good.
Yeah, they asked me to share some stuff about myself, and I told everybody that I pee sitting down.
Own it, just own it.
I do. Well, that's the thing, is then I get all these private chats on the Zoom call from people, guys who are like, I pee sitting down too, or girls who are like, yeah, all the men in my house do it, and it's all for the same reason, because at some point you realize that pee fucking gets everywhere, no matter how hard you try to not.
Yes.
I don't care how good your aim is. Sometimes it's in sniper mode, and sometimes it's in shotgun mode, and you don't know.
You just gave me permission to not teach my son to stand up.
Yeah, you take a blacklight to your bathroom, and you're going to see how there's no getting that shit off.
Oh, that's funny.
Women live their whole lives peeing sitting down, and they're fine.
Yes.
So I can do it too. They were like, tell us about yourself. I'm like, I'm an energy healer, and I have a kid, and I pee sitting down. And the fact that I was welcomed by other people who there was this joined in a chorus of male sitting peers.
Yep.
I was like, this is the second best part of my day.
Isn't this amazing when you speak your truth? What happens? Look at all those people.
I did not know
Don't
there were that
hide
many
from your truth. Yeah.
men who pee sitting down. I should start a group for people. I don't
Exactly.
know.
That'd be funny.
It was amazing. That was the best part of the Zen talk, was finding out that other guys pee sitting down. So
awesome. And on that note, it's 1:11. 1 hour and 11 minutes in.
Wow, look at all those ones. Is there a meaning to 1:11 like there is to 11:11?
Oh, probably. But there's just...
It's like
least
3/4
there's
of
an
the
11
way
in
to
there.
there is an 11. It's all ones. That's what matters.
Yes.
Until next time, everybody. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/True North Podcast 11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do, I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops, and you can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are.
And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect. What
about the gratitude?
This one. Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.